Welcome to Advanced Data Analysis 1 with me, Erik Erhardt, Professor of Statistics at the University of New Mexico. In this video, I'll help you get started with Worksheet 4, Making a Personal Codebook. So here we are at the website, and if you open up this table of contents, you can very quickly jump down to the timetable, which is where all the assignments are. I'll click there. All right, there's the timetable, and this is the fourth class assignment on the personal codebook. So I will be posting a video on this assignment in this spot right here, and that's this video that you're watching right now. All right, so let's start by what I would usually do to get started with an assignment is I'd open up the HTML and download the RMD file. So on a Windows machine, you would right-click on RMD and save link as, and if you're on a Macintosh, something similar to that, where you maybe save link as or save file as. And then the HTML file, I would usually open that in a new tab that's open up here, but if I were to close that, you can press Control or Command and click, and that will automatically open it in a new tab. Right-click and open in a new tab is another way of doing that. So let's go look at this assignment. There will always be a rubric at the top and then the content below. The goal of this assignment is to look at the large data set that we're going to be using this semester and choose variables from that data set that are interesting to you that you will use throughout the rest of the semester to perform analyses. So let me come back to the rubric at the end, because in the context of the rest of the assignment, it will make more sense. Oh, by the way, you should be watching these videos probably at 1.5 speed, because you can listen much faster than I can talk. All right, so we are going to, in this semester, use the NESARC dataset. The NESARC dataset, NESARC stands for National Epidemiologic Survey on Alcohol and Related Conditions. There is a code book associated with that. We'll look at that in a second. If you want to learn more, you can go to the official site, and there's also a page that introduces the study if you want to have a little more context for what we'll be looking at. So using this data set, I want you to choose from among the variables listed at the bottom of this document. So let's go ahead and scroll there right now. Okay, so here's the code book, and this is where you will put your own variables. So there's a key for each variable. It should sort of have this format where there's the original variable name, such as ID num, the renamed variable, how it appears in your data set, the description, like this. This is a unique ID number with no alphabetics. There's just numbers. What data type it is, whether it's a continuous number like a person's age or their height or weight. Discrete would be like how many family members do you live with, 0, 1, 2, 3. Nominal are names like red, blue, green. And ordinal are categories that are ordered, like questions like from a Likert scale, where you ask, like, how much do you agree with this statement? Strongly disagree, disagree, neutral, agree, strongly agree. Those are ordered categories. That's ordinal. So here we've got, this is nominal. The IDs are nominal, and there's a whole bunch of them, 43,000 of them. Sex is also nominal with two categories, male and female. That's how they're represented in this data set. Age is a continuous variable, and there are 14 people who are 98 years or older. So in this data set, they didn't go, up to 104 years old or something. They stopped at 98. They also have height and in feet and inches. Anyway, I'm sort of getting in the weeds here. So we are going to add more variables here, the ones that you choose from the data set. Also, if there are variables that you create or are thinking ahead that you might want to create, you could create them here. I'll give a few examples as we look at the codebook. All right, so choose among these variables. Let me take a quick detour to the codebook from the official codebook of the NESARC dataset. It has 480 pages, and there are 3,008 variables. And so I saved a lot of you a lot of time. Instead of having you page through 480 pages of what is interesting in this data set, I just made some choices for us as a way to focus our attention to things that I think that you might find interesting. So I listed those so in this list here. There's about 100 or 150 of these variables listed here, and that should be enough to get us started. So I'm going to force everyone to have these variables: age, sex, and then people's heights and weights, as well as the unique identifier, of course. And then I want you to choose from among the following. And the only criteria at the end of the day that we want to satisfy is we want at least two, if I jump up to the top for a moment, we need at least two categorical variables and two numeric variables. Okay? That allows us to make relationships between pairs of variables. So you can ask, how does a categorical variable affect or influence either a categorical response or a numeric response? Or the other way around, where you've got a numeric variable, how does that influence a categorical response or a numeric response? So that's why I want to have at least two of each. Now you can have more than that as well. And I have some additional criteria here to satisfy. All right, so let's jump down to the variables. All right, so they come in several sections. The first section is just background information, general stuff like whether you're born in the USA, what's your marital status, age at first marriage. There's schooling, how much work you're doing, what your income is. Let's see, there's stuff here about health insurance, okay, and whether you've had family members or close friends die or have a serious illness or injury. That I figure might be related to like depression or anxiety or those types of things that come later in the code book, and whether you've changed some jobs. So a variable that might be interesting to create. So say you're interested in someone's healthcare or healthcare status. So all 4 or 5 of these variables relate to healthcare. Oh, excuse me. Self-perceived current health is not healthcare. This tends to be a really valuable variable. I haven't studied it in this data set, but in other data sets, it tends to predict a lot about a person's lifestyle. But these 4 all relate to health insurance. So you might want to create, if you were interested in health insurance and other things like whether you have a job, then you might want to create a new variable that says if you have any of these 4, then you are covered by health insurance. So we would need to then add these 4 variables to our codebook and create a new variable that is, do you have health insurance? We'll do an example like that in a little bit. The next section is about alcohol consumption, and I'll let you read through this, but I just want to look at a couple of these because some of these sort of repeat. There's a big section, so there's one variable that's just about, do you drink at all? Yes, no. And then there are like 1,000 questions on alcohol. That's an exaggeration. There's probably about 400 questions or 500 questions on alcohol, not an exaggeration. And so I took the variables that related to beer, that's these 5, I skipped wine coolers and a bunch of like other smaller ones, but then I also included wine and liquor, groups of those. And you might think about, if you're interested in alcohol, you might take sets of these and combine them in a way. So for example, this top one is just about whether you drank at all in the last 12 months. Okay, so you're getting sort of a snapshot of what they've done recently. If they did drink, then how often did they drink? And then what's the number of drinks that they consumed when they consumed beer, right? So you've got how often and then how much. And both of those are sort of interesting on their own, but if you combine them, if you sort of take those and multiply them, then you've got this frequency and how much, so you've got sort of a total in a way, and can say something like, give an estimate for the total number of beers over the year, or something like that. So if, for example, if you drink weekly and you usually have about 2 beers every week, then 2 times 52, that's about 100 beers per year. So that would be a simple way to summarize their total amount of drinking. The other two are sort of similar, but it's the largest number. So sort of like when you binge, how much? Okay, so like once a month I drink 8 beers. That may be something you are maybe less willing to combine because it's more about a maximum than a typical or an average. All right, let's see what else we have. Where did you drink? Okay, that's like at home or a bar or with friends. All right. All right. Some things about age. So remember, I want you to have some categorical and numeric variables. So a categorical good one here is like drinking status, yes, no. Number of beers and largest number, those are nice number numeric variables, especially if you combine them into a single value like numbers of beers per year. Age when started drinking might be a pretty good numeric variable. All right, we've got a family history of alcoholism. Here's another one where it might be good to combine. So if you're looking at, was your father an alcoholic or was your mother an alcoholic? Well, if you combine them both and say mother or father alcoholic, that's a nice way to combine these two variables into a single one to understand whether family history of alcoholism affects your own use of alcohol. All right, quickly through the rest. There's one about tobacco and smoking, and I just pulled out the ones related to cigarettes, but there's like pipe smoking and all sorts of other things. You can go beyond this list if you wish to choose some variables that are not in the subset that I chose. This is just a way to focus our attention here. Medicine use, I just focused on cannabis, but there's a lot of things under medicine. Similarly, I think for drug abuse and dependence, I focused on cannabis. But there's lots of others. There's probably, I forget, there's like 8 or 10 drugs that they focus on. All right, and these are sort of interesting, but typically you're going to get small numbers, small samples of people who are abused or dependent on drugs, and we'll see that in a bit when we look at this actual code book. So if you want sort of larger samples, you probably stick to alcohol, because in this country we drink a lot of alcohol, or a lot of people drink alcohol. Probably both those statements are true. All right, and there's lots of sort of interesting questions I think here, like have you ever gotten into a physical fight when you're under the influence of cannabis? That's probably physically impossible. Have you ever, had job or school troubles? Okay, ever drive a car under the influence of it? Okay. And I say, yeah, if you're interested in additional effects of use, there are a bunch more that I just didn't put in here because it was starting to feel redundant. There's a section about drug treatment. That's going to be fairly small samples, but if that's something that you're interested in, definitely go to that section and take a look at it. Similarly, family's history of drug abuse. Then we start getting into mood. So we've got a section on depression and family history of depression. And there's sort of a overall, right, the first question. So I think this is like section 4A. Yeah, it's 4A. Q1, question 1. So you can sort of decode the variable names based on where they are. The first question in each section is usually like, does this apply to you at all? And if someone answers yes to that, then they go on to answer a bunch of other questions. If they say no to that first question, or maybe a few other additional questions, then those people don't get answered the follow-up, or don't get asked the follow-up questions. Anyway, so this first one we've got, have you ever had a 2-week period when you felt down? Okay. Have you ever had a 2-week period when you just didn't care about things? Okay. And then when was the first time that you had a depressive episode or low mood episode? And how many of those episodes do you think you've had? So these are, the first couple are good categorical variables, and the next two are good numeric variables. And have you ever sought help, either from a counselor or medicine? And then family history of depression. So I would probably, for depression, I would probably include all of these, father, mother, and brothers and sisters. So if you were interested in family history of depression, combine all 4 of these and just make family history of depression a variable. And if any of these 4 are true, then set that equal to true. All right. There's another section on low mood, and there's also a section on high mood. And then I focused on anxiety. I have this in my family, not myself, unfortunately, but a lot of my family does. And so I copied this comment from this section as well, that they most refer to these specific disorders. Agoraphobia thinks it's sort of like fear of people, or sometimes it's also like fear of places, or like leaving your house. Anyway, so here's like panic attacks and or other ways of like being overwhelmed or nervous. Okay, and the first time you've had that. There's a section on social situations, similar type of questions. There's generalized anxiety, and there's antisocial personality disorder, and a few other sections that I've sort of skipped over, but there's gambling. There aren't very many people who have issues with gambling. One of my favorite, recently, my favorite comedians, Norm Macdonald, who's an old Saturday Night Live host, not host, but he did a Weekend Update. I get he sort of has a problem with gambling. Anyway, medical conditions and diagnoses. So actually, so if you want like people's like actual diagnosis of whether they have an issue or not, I think this last section might be worth skimming through. The rest of it is voluntary response. And I'm not sure on this last part whether it's sort of DSM diagnosis from a therapist, a clinical person who did that. But anyway, so let's go through an example. That was sort of a lot of discussion, but that's sort of the set of variables that we'll be looking at this semester. Let's go to the assignment and see what we'll do, what you're doing for this assignment. So I'm going to switch over. So, go back to the website. I've downloaded my RMD file by saving the link to a certain folder. I go to RStudio and I've opened that file. Why don't I just go ahead and open that one more time, just so you can see the process. You can click on this folder, or you can go to File, Open. Either one gets you to the same place. And have a folder somewhere for all of your files. I recommend just putting everything in one folder. I'm going to name them in a way that will make them sort nicely, so you'll always be able to find stuff. If you start creating a bunch of subfolders and putting things in there, you'll find that things don't work very well. It will be hard. All right, so there's my file. Now, we're not doing any R programming yet. We're just getting our ideas in order. So we're just going to move all these windows to the side. These two windows go up and down. This bottom window is the console. That's where you'll type things like you'll do some math equations and stuff. But I'm just going to minimize that. And now I've sort of maximized the area where I'm going to be working. And this is the RMD file I just downloaded. The first thing to do is just to knit it. Make sure that it works. Okay, so I've clicked knit, and the result's popping up. And it looks just like the one that we were looking at on the website. So I'm going to close it for now. Let's scroll down. Okay, this sort of maximized again. There. All right. So this is what I'd like you to do. So we're going to go down and scroll through some of these variables and find some that we like. Let's say I liked one of those family history ones. So let's pretend we're interested in alcohol. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, if we're interested in alcohol, probably the first question is going to be good. So we'll do drinking status. And why don't we focus on beer, because lots of people drink beer. And at the moment, I'll just choose basically all the beer questions. So I'm going to copy that. I do Command C, but you can do right click. Oh, that's weird. I should get a copy there. Oh, I'll just try it with my keystrokes. Copy. And then I'm going to scroll up to the section where it says add more here. Okay, so this is I'm going to the top of the codebook just to help orient us. Okay, so there's the codebook. Now I'm going to scroll down to the add more here, and I'm going to paste, and hopefully, okay, good. So I'm going to focus on those variables. Let's go back down and grab some more. Let's see. Let's focus on just alcohol for the moment, and family history of alcohol. Okay, I like that. So we'll grab those and bring them back up and paste them there. Okay, so I've got my drinking and then family history. And let's go down and just get a couple more. So I'm just going to press page down a bunch. Let's do the panic. Where's the, that was a good one for family history. Oh, here we go, depression. Okay, so let's focus on depression. And I mean, I went through this. I sort of like all these questions. So I'm just going to copy depression and the family history. Makes sense to me that family history is going to play a role in whether someone has depression or not. All right, so I'm going to remove the headers. All right, there we go. So let's say that we're happy with this list. All right, I'm going to focus on the relationship between drinking status and depression. And we won't be able to, in this class, tease out whether drinking causes depression or whether depression causes drinking. Right? The directionality of that relationship will be a question for us, but we can understand whether there's a relationship. You know, for people who are depressed, is it more likely that they drink than people who are not depressed? Okay, things like that. All right, so now let's see how we go about creating this code book. This window moved over a touch. There we go. All right. So the first variable name is consumer. So I'm going to highlight that and press copy, Command or Control C. And I'm going to go back over to the codebook. And I recommend that you download this codebook to your computer. You may be using it throughout the semester. I'm just In fact, I will set a good example and do that right now. And we'll open it here. All right, pretty good. Now we're going to find. So Control F. I guess you can do edit, fine, but do Control F because you're going to do this a bunch. And I'm going to search for, right, the window popped up in the top right, search for consumer and press enter. Now consumer is sort of just a name, so it doesn't have high entropy, but fortunately it is the variable that we found. So here we are, section 2A. I think I can zoom in a tiny bit here without it being too hard for us. So there's section 2A, and consumer, let me make this window a better size. There. It's hard to record a video, guys. All right, so now I've got my arrow key and I can scroll down. So here's consumer, here's the top of the section, alcohol consumption, here's the variable name. And so I'm just going to take this whole section and copy it because it has all my codebook information. It's got the variable name, it's got the description, drinking status, it's got the 3 levels, 1, 2, and 3. Those are the levels of the categorical variable, what we'll call factor variable, and it has their labels. 1 is a current drinking, 2 is next drinking, and 3 is a person who's never drank. Notice that most of our population are current drinkers. And these numbers are the frequencies. So it's how many people in our data set of the 43,000 or so are people who drink. So this is going to tell you right away whether you've got a lot of people who satisfy this condition or very few people. So I'm just going to copy all this stuff. Copy, so Control C or Command C. Go back over to RStudio, and probably for now I'll just paste it right in here. And I'll just do a couple tiny modifications. If I highlight this whole thing and I press the Tab key, it indented it. Okay? So I've got it all highlighted. I'm going to press the Tab key. Boom. There might be other ways of doing that. Under the code, I think there's a way to like indent, but it's not really going to work very well when it's not actually computer code. Okay, anyway, so there is my first variable. This thing we can remove, these numbers. All right, so there's my first one. Second one, so then I can highlight, Command C to copy, go over to the other. Oh, by the way, this is another just a computer hint. If you hold down your Alt key, or on a Windows, I think it's your Command key, and then press Tab and continue holding that Alt or Command key, it'll bring up this window. And these are all the apps that are open on your computer right now. And you can press Tab to go through them. And when you've selected the one you want, you let go of the Alt key or the Command key, and it opens up that program. So then you can press Alt Tab. You can switch between 2 programs. Okay, I hope I didn't induce any epilepsy from that going back and forth. Okay, so then Command F, or Control F, Control V, and search for that next variable name. All of these strings are going to be pretty unique, so it brought me right to that variable name. Drank any beers in the last 12 months? Yeah, let's go ahead and grab all that stuff. Go over to RStudio, paste it in there. There's the variable name. There's that stuff. Highlight, press Tab, and I've got the next one. Right. So you can go through pretty quickly in about 20 minutes after you've selected your variables. You can have all the content in there. Let's do one more thing. I mean, so there's several more things to do, of course, to create your own variable names. So drinking status, I might say drink, actually just drinking status. Okay, so that's the variable name that I'm going to use. In fact, let's go follow the nice example here. What do I want these code books to look like? We've got the renamed variable name. That's the variable name that I'm going to give it. We've got the original variable name, the description, the data type. So that's something that I want to add in. But then the frequency, item value, description, that we get directly from the code book. So if we come back here, I just created this variable drinking status from consumer. I'm going to get rid of my original line. That's my new variable name. That's the original variable name. That's the description. This is a categorical variable. And if I want this to look pretty, I can line up those numbers. And there we go. Let's do one numeric variable. Let's see, how about number of beers? Just so that we can see how I would set up that variable. So I'll grab that variable, I copied it, go over to the code book. Oh, I'm doing that over here. Find, Control F, paste the variable in, Control V, press enter, brings me right there. Highlight all of these. Oh good, well, I get to talk about blanks and NAs. Go over to RStudio, paste it in. Okay, we'll tidy this up a little bit. Number of beers. All right, grab all this, highlight it, and press Tab. And then, what should we call this? We'll do num beers and this is number of beers. I guess this is like just consumed. That's good enough. Down below, there's a number of beers consumed, sort of, but it's like the largest number of beers. So you probably want to call this something else. Like if you're doing both of these, you might do number of beers consumed largest, something like that, to distinguish those two. All right, so I've got my new variable name, I've got the original variable name, I've got the description. We can get rid of the line of hyphens. And then this is numeric. And it goes anywhere from 1 to 42. So we know that the maximum number is 42. And so 18,000 people responded with a value anywhere from 1 to 42. Okay? We don't know the distribution of that right now, but early in the semester, in the week or two, we'll be plotting this data. If I line these up, 78 people said 99, or said unknown. So they asked, like, you know, how many beers do you usually drink? And the respondent just said, I don't know. And they were asked again, like, well, was it 4, 5? And they just said, I don't know. So 78 people did that. And that is coded as a 99 in our data set. So this variable, there's 78 values in this data set with a 99, and we'll need to recode that as missing, sort of, it's unknown. We won't be able to do any statistics with people who have an unknown value because we don't know what the value is. And then for the rest of the people who basically don't drink or something, they have a blank in that data set, in that position. And those are also unknown values. And that's what NA means, not available. Okay? So they didn't drink, or it was unknown whether they drank in the last 12 months. All right. Anyway, so that's a nice way to format each variable. One more is family history. So we've got our two family history variables. So let's just give each of these names. So we'll do, like, how about we do alcoholic father, and then alcoholic mother. Okay, so those would be the two variable names that we create, and pretend that we've copied the associated codebook stuff for these two variables. So I'm going to now be thinking ahead, well, we really want to create a new additional variable that we created. So here's our family history. So alcoholic family. And that's going to be, well, I shouldn't quite have done it that way. Okay. So it's basically if your father or mother were alcoholic. And that's sort of enough to put in here right now. Maybe you want to do like family history of alcoholism. Okay. And the way that we'll construct that variable a bit later, in a couple weeks, is we'll say if either of those are true, then we have a family history of alcoholism. Okay? All right. And that's most of the assignment. Let's go up to the rubric, and we'll see that there's a couple more pieces to this assignment. Most of it's copy-paste. All right. All right, I did recommend a particular strategy. Let's go through the strategy. So we've downloaded the codebook. We've reviewed the list of variables at the bottom of this document, and we found a set of variables that were of interest to us, and we've made sure that we have at least two categorical variables and two numeric variables. And, you know, I recommend probably getting 4 or 5 of each, just so you've got a collection of variables to work with. And okay, so I sort of put this in a slightly different order, but it's okay. Develop a few research questions that relate to the pairs of the variable. Does A relate to B? So as I might be thinking about this, if I scroll down here to the variables that we selected, we've got variables related to alcohol, and we've got variables related to depression. So obvious questions here might be, let's do something sort of specific. So we've got number of beers consumed. How about we use that variable? And how about whether you go to a counselor? I don't know, that's sort of a pretty weak question, but I'll go for it. The quality of the questions isn't really what we're looking for. It's more about, at this point, just sort of making some rough connections. So let's maybe phrase it the other direction. Does going to a counselor for depression relate to or predict the number of drinks when you drink? And that's I'll be more specific, number of beers when you drink. Okay? And if you really want to be really clear about this, you can choose actually go down and grab the variable name. So counselor, maybe we create a new variable which is depression counselor. And I see now that I've had a misspelling earlier. You'll see that a lot in my videos. Does going to a counselor for depression, okay, so I'm going to put in here the variable name. And I'm going to go over here and fix the spelling. Does going to a counselor for depression, so that's whether this is basically yes or no, predict the number of beers that you drink when you drink. So if I scroll back down and grab that variable, number of beers consumed, okay, and we'll go back up. I'm going to just push page up a couple times. Number of beers when you drink. All right, cool. Now there's no question about what that research question means. I'm going to let basically the depression or the counselor be the X variable and the predictor variable, and see whether that determines on average how many beers people drink. Maybe people who go to counseling for depression drink fewer beers, maybe say 2, than people who don't go to a counselor, say 4 on average. I mean, I'm someone who can't possibly drink 4 beers. I can barely drink a full beer. All right, and I've got 3 questions here. You don't need to do 3 questions. You could do 2 questions. You could do 5 questions. Just a way of getting you thinking about this, okay? And once you've got all your research questions, right, and you've done some relationships there, then has a topic revealed itself to you? So in this case, my topic basically is the relationship between depression and drinking, and specifically beer. Okay, that's a fairly broad statement, but in the research questions, there's going to be several specific instances of that relationship, of types of relationships between depression and drinking. All right, let's go back up to the recommend the strategy. So you've got your research questions, you've got a topic, and go ahead and complete your codebook by copying and pasting stuff from the original codebook. And finally, use the rubric to grade yourself to see if you've done everything. Okay, the graders are going to be using the rubric also, so you might as well grade yourself first. So I'm going to scroll up now and take a look at the rubric, and we can look at the nicer version of the rubric here if I go up to the top. Okay, so did you define a topic? Are the variables that you chose relevant to your research questions? Well, you can answer that right away by including those variable names right in there with those research questions. So that's the best way to do it. Are there at least 2 categorical and 2 numeric variables? So make sure you've got some. And in particular, we want one categorical variable to only have 2 levels, just yes, no. And we want at least one categorical variable to have at least 3 levels, like a little bit, none, a little, sometimes, and then a lot. You know, something like that would be a good variable. Or what types of alcohol do you drink? You know, or what's your primary alcohol? Is it beer, wine, liquor, other things? Numeric variables should have lots of unique values. For example, if there was like an age you started drinking, maybe for most people that's between 15 and 23 or something. That would be a fairly narrow range if that represented the whole distribution for the sample. But if you had something that went from like 19 years old to 50 years old, well, you got quite a wide spread now, and that's a much better numeric variable for analysis. It's going to be hard for you to know really what that range is from the codebook. That's not entirely true. Like this number of beers goes from 1 to 42. 42 beers when you usually drink? That can't be right. That person's in a coma. These 98. Anyway, what's going to happen with a lot of these numeric variables, like number of beers, is there's going to be a lot of people. It's going to follow a Pareto distribution, with most of the people have very few. Like lots of people have 1 or 2, and very few people have like 10 or more. Like one of my college roommates way back then. Okay, let's go back to but ideally, you can sort of think it through if you find a numeric variable. Oh, here's a good one for several categories. Okay, has like 4 or 5 categories. They're also thinking ahead. there will be, we'll be able to take variables like this, like how often did you drink, and make that into a numeric variable, right? So in terms of thinking about it in terms of like how many times per year. Okay, so if every day you could take that, and every day in a year, okay, 365. If you did once a week, that would be 52. If you did once a month, that would be 12. So we could turn a categorical variable like this into a numeric variable and use that numerically later on. So just sort of to get you thinking about, well, this isn't quite the right variable for me, but this turns out to be a nice numeric variable. And if you take this and you multiply it by, the number of beers you drank, then you get total number of beers in a year. All right, let me make sure I'm jumping all over the place now. Okay, you're welcome to use more variables. For each variable, did you put all the stuff in? Right? Is there a description, data type, and coded values if it's a factor variable? Cool. If you did all those things, then you get all these points. And points means prizes if this was a game show. And then you just print it to PDF and save it. So we just did a bunch of work. I mean, not that much. But one thing I recommend is every so often, go ahead and click knit. That does two things. It saves the file for you, and it makes sure that it still looks like a file. Okay, so here's the drinking variables that we put in. That's the drinking status. Here's one of the other ones. So things are looking good here. All right, I feel pretty good about that. Oh, last thing is after you knit it, to print it to PDF. I know you've all already done this on an assignment, but you can click Open in Browser. It opens it up here, and then you can print. I always just press Control P, but maybe up here. Yeah, in Google Chrome, in this triple dot, there's a print. In others, there's going to be maybe a file menu where you can print, and just print it to PDF. I think there might be, or save as PDF. Either of those are fine. And then upload that to UNM Learn under this assignment. All right, that's everything. I apologize this was so long, but I hope you watched it at a fast speed so that it wasn't too painful. And I hope you enjoy the assignment. This is a really important assignment because we're going to use this data for the rest of the semester. So do your best to make some good decisions early on, and it will make the rest of the semester less painful. All right, see you next time.